Thank you very, very much, Rabbi Hagler. And Shalom Lachem. It's very, very special for me to be here with you. And I cannot tell you how very proud and happy I am to be here with you and this Aron Kodesh. Let me tell you the story of the Aron Kodesh. Not so much the story of the Aron Kodesh, but the story of the person who dedicated the Aron Kodesh. Her name was Martha Cohen. She was the first full-time secretary of Lincoln Square Synagogue, which is a synagogue that we started almost ancient history in 1964. So for you, believe me, that's ancient history. When I was a very, very young rabbi, 24 years old, and I went into a neighborhood that was a new neighborhood around Lincoln Center, that in a study that was made of the neighborhood, it was called not only non-religious, but anti-religious. There were many Jews, but they were mostly artists, musicians, avant-garde, pretty, very, very, very liberal people politically, and not very given to religion. And I was very anxious because it started out as a non-Orthodox shul, as a conservative shul. My job was to make it Orthodox and to bring in a mechitza and to bring in Torah and halacha. And I thought about it a lot. We started actually in a little apartment. I thought about it a lot. And I thought what I need is everything has to look young and modern. And I was interviewing young, modern-looking secretaries. Walked in this woman who was 64 years old with a heavy German accent. And she said that she would like to be the secretary of the synagogue. And I was very honest with her. I told her I don't think, and she had a hip problem, so she didn't walk quite so straight. And I said to her, you know, we have a lot of dreams, and it's very difficult, and the neighborhood is a new neighborhood and very intellectual, and the people are not Orthodox, and I want to give Orthodoxy a young image. So she smiled and she said, I'll tell you something. You'll get a young, modern secretary, and she'll get married, and she'll take off, and she'll get pregnant, and she'll give birth, and she'll take off. With me, you know, I'm a widow, I'm not going to get married, I'm not going to give birth. You'll know you'll have someone very steady, who loves Judaism very much, and who will work 24 hours a day. There was something about her that made me feel this is the person. And we hired her. She was not blessed with children. Very dedicated. Her family had lived in Germany for close to 300 years. And no one except for her and her sister of her family was willing to leave in the late 1930s when everything looked so dangerous in Germany. Because they said, it can't be, we've lived here for so long. She and her sister left the family and went. came to America. Anyway, she steadfastly always remained deeply religious. She was supposed to come at 9. She came every morning at 8. She was supposed to leave at 5. She usually stayed again until 8 in the evening. Once, I'll never forget, there was a very, very strong snowstorm. And nothing was working. And there was no means of transportation. The synagogue was on 69th and Amsterdam Avenue. She lived in the late 90s or early 100s of the West Side. So she walked from there. She worked a full day. In the evening, she said, "Rabbi, can I sleep on 2 chairs in the synagogue? I can't get back, and I want to be here tomorrow morning." So, of course, I took her to my house. She knew the telephone numbers of every member of the shul by heart. She understood that there was a great deal of sensitivity because you were dealing with different kinds of people. After a while, Baruch Hashem, it took about 6 months. We had a mechitza in the shul. It became a completely Orthodox shul. So some religious people even joined the shul. You had to have sensitivity to know how to deal with the Orthodox people and the non-Orthodox people. She sat to everybody. She knew everybody. She spoke to everybody. She knew where everyone had to sit, next to whom, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur especially, which could be a madhouse. She knew exactly who to direct me to ask. We were building a synagogue. And her dedication is impossible to describe. The most sensitive thing I ever remember is on a Saturday night, I got a call from her. "Mrs. Cohen, everything is all right." She said, "Rabbi, I noticed something that I think you have to know." There was a blind man in the synagogue. And she said that when I was walking in back of the Torah on Shabbat morning, she knows that every Shabbat I always gave him a special greeting. This time my mind was someplace else. There was another issue before. I didn't remember what it was. But anyway, I didn't give him the special greeting. And he put out his talit to kiss the Torah, but he couldn't see. And my mind was apparently someplace else. And I overlooked him, and he never got a chance to kiss the Torah. And she said, "I saw the way his wife looked from the women's section. And I think you should call them." That was the kind of person she was. And I was very fortunate I called them because his wife thought that I was angry at her husband. I had done something on purpose. And I felt terrible. But she noticed everything. Towards the end of her life, she said she wants to make a dedication. And at that time, Lincoln Square Synagogue was known for the fact that it had families and many children. She wasn't a wealthy woman. In addition to the synagogue and everything else, that she had to do for the synagogue, she was very dedicated to Shaarei Tzedek Hospital in Israel. And that was her life. Her life was the synagogue and Shaarei Tzedek. Her life was service to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Judaism. She said, I want an Aron Kodesh. And I want an Aron Kodesh in a place where there are children. And I want an Aron Kodesh where children will be kissing the Aron Kodesh. So I want to dedicate the Aron Kodesh. And it was an important and big dedication. She said, this is what I want. And this is the Aron Kodesh she dedicated. It was done by my son-in-law. He'll come to see it, I'm sure, also. He was the architect.
He was here to put it in.
Pardon? He was here to put it in, right. And I'll show you what she loved. When we used to take the Torah out, I always went like this. I was standing next to the Torah. Because she said, the rabbi makes the Torah dance. And that's what I would like. I would like the Torah to be dancing. And so all the years that I was the rabbi of the synagogue, I would make sure that the Torah was dancing when the ark was open for the Sefer Torah. Lincoln Square Synagogue moved. And they were in a building, 2 buildings away, had to give up the old building, and the Aron Kodesh didn't fit in any of the new buildings because of the ceilings. And it's very beautiful. I mean, I believe it's truly beautiful, and of course you see the menorah, the kind of menorah-like gold outside of the Aron Kodesh, and the dancing Torahs inside of the Aron Kodesh. And there was no room because the ceilings were much lower than your ceiling here. And what they were planning to do was to chop it in pieces and bury the pieces. And when I heard that, I burst out in tears. Outside of my house, I have a little garden in Efrat. And that's where I love to learn, and that's where I write the Divrei Torah before Shabbos. I could look out to the Arei Yehuda. And we have a little vineyard, and I call it Martha's Vineyard after Martha Cohen. Because she had no children. And the Torah and children in the future of the Torah was the most important thing to her. And that's where when I learn with my grandchildren for the bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah, I always do it there in Martha's Vineyard, kind of. And to think that they would take the Aron Kodesh and chop it in pieces. I was up all night. And I said, just transport it to Efrat. It was virtually impossible. They couldn't even guarantee that it would come in one piece. And then when I heard that it was coming here, you have no idea how happy it made me feel. So I think it's an Aron Kodesh that was dedicated by a very, very, very special woman. For me, one of the most important women in my life, in the life of Torah, certainly on the West Side. So I'm very glad that here, Be'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach, it will help in the Torah of New Jersey as well. I thank you very much, and may it be really a very fitting blessing and memorial to a very, very special woman, Martha Cohen. Kol Tov.